All right, so let's turn our focus now back to our top story and bring in political analyst Lukhona Mnguni. And of course, our conversation is around the news that broke today, of course, on the SABC platform that Advocate Dali Mpofu has resigned from the EFF, and he is, in fact, joining Umkhonto Wesizwe. Lukhona, thank you so much for your time, and good afternoon to you. So, essentially, a lot of issues here to unpack, but perhaps let's start here. I mean, did Mpofu cross over to the MK party come as a surprise to you, especially when you consider that, as he told Mzwandile Mbeje in that exclusive interview announcing his resignation, he was an instrumental tool in the formation of the MK party in trying to sell this vision that ultimately led to the formation of the Progressive Caucus. Just your reactions on that.
Well, good afternoon, Unati, and good afternoon to your viewers. I mean, it's unsurprising because there's quite clear momentum of people, or of an exodus of people from the EFF towards the MK party. Of course, initially it was an exodus of people from the ANC, and then we saw some consolidation with smaller parties like your Shiluba, your Sara, Abel Dawo's party, and so on. So there's not much surprising because MK party actually does have some momentum post-elections, and they started this by the formation of the Progressive Caucus with the EFF, ATM, UAT, and others in Parliament, and then, of course, the formation of the Progressive Forces, which was an extra-parliamentary alliance of various political parties, and some were too small to gain seats in the National Assembly, and we've now since seen leaders of some of those parties cross over to MK party. So I think where we are currently in our political landscape, MK party is showing a sense of, as I've called it before, institutionalization, a sense of momentum building post-election, and having a very clear political program in terms of what it is that they stand for going forward. I spoke, on this platform, Nati, when Floyd Shivambu left, and at the time I had said, we don't have enough information, but there are two possibilities. Either Floyd has had a massive personal fallout with Julius Malema, or secondly, Floyd Shivambu will act as a gateway and a bridge for the EFF to go and cross over to MK party. As you would know, the EFF continues to be represented in the National Assembly and various provincial legislatures. So the party can't close shop until 2029. And I do think that there must be some sense of a pact. And I think my suspicion continues to grow with the evidence that is before us. Some sense of a pact that these parties would cooperate with one another, probably create more volume for each other, and then they must make a trade-off towards 2029, exactly which party will be on the ballot. Currently, as things stand, if the EFF continues in this kind of trajectory on its own and does not actually have some form of a pact with MK party, the EFF, potentially risks becoming a very small party towards 2026 and, of course, in 2029.
And I'm glad you unpacked, the implications and what this then means for the EFF. I want us then to just look at, in the interim, what are they supposed to be focusing on? I mean, Advocate Mpofu's departure marks, as you said, another blow for the party following Shivambu's surprise move, going to the MK party, especially considering that the EFF's National People's Assembly, as you've also rightfully said, the elective conference next month is another crucial one to watch. Then, of course, we see the reaction from Malema on the X platform, seemingly unfazed and unmoved by yet, another high-profile resignation. I mean, what are we likely to see at the elective conference next month? What is he likely then to say to restore confidence to the party?
Well, I think Malema is presented with very difficult choices because he has to inspire confidence amongst the rank and file of the EFF, particularly its members, who might not actually know what is happening with the top leaders, who have no idea and no entry into their thinking, their deliberations, and their caucuses. And therefore, he has to present a very brave and strong face in the upcoming national People's Assembly, which will be elective. For the first time, the EFF will have to contend with electing a new deputy president, because if you look at the top leadership of the EFF, there are only two positions since 2014 that have remained unchanged, and that's the position of the president and the deputy president. Otherwise, chairperson, secretary, deputy secretary, treasurer, we've seen a change of hands and a change of people occupying those roles. So for the first time, the presidency has to be occupied by, someone else other than Floyd Shivambu, and I think that's going to be a very difficult deliberation, and Malema will be somewhat influential, as he has been influential in various elective congresses of the EFF, in that he also sits amongst delegates and shows up his hand of preference in terms of which person to nominate and so on, which is, in one way or the other, a very coercive kind of move for a leader to indicate to the supporters that if you probably vote against this candidate, then you are not with me, and that is, maybe something that lands other people into trouble. So I think that he goes into the National People's Assembly needing to show that face of confidence, but he has to have a clarity of mind in terms of who is the person he believes he can trust to occupy the second in command position. And of course, the tweet that you have shown to the viewers, quite clear that he is aware that at least two other, prominent, loved leaders of the EFF are to jump over to MK party. The reality is that in actual fact, he's sailing in the dark. He's not quite sure who's with him and who's not with him. And some people might bide their time. They might be public representatives, and they would want to occupy their seats until, the eve of the next elections, whether at local government or at national and provincial elections. And then he's got to live with that sense of anxiety and uncertainty, unless, of course, as I say, there is still the other universe of possibilities where maybe some grand deal is struck between MK and EFF, and that come 2029, the EFF might not even be on the ballot paper. I think our politics are so shifty in this country and across the world that actually anything and everything remains a possibility these days, Unati.
And that's very interesting as you look at what might be the possibilities. I mean, just looking at some of the names that are already being thrown around in as far as who will then take up that position of deputy president. I mean, there is a lot of talk that the party's members within the EFF are fighting over who should succeed Shivambu at the party's elective conference next month. I mean, several names have been thrown about. When we interrogate Malema's comments again on the back of Mpofu's resignation, where should then one place Mbuyiseni Ndlozi's future as an example? I mean, we understand his name has been supported by some branches for the deputy presidency role, but I mean, looking at that earlier on by Malema, one then wonders what his future looks like. Then there's the party's chairperson, Veronica Mente, who's occupied that role since 2019, who also has a major support at branch level.
Well, Unati, I think our line is a bit shaky now on my side, but I'll attempt to answer that if I had properly. I mean, it's about structures, branches, and some personalities in terms of where things go. Look, I mean, the EFF inherently as a child born out of the ANC has not escaped the reality, particularly that hogs the ANC, which is factionalism. Not to say other parties don't deal with it, but it's much more pronounced there. So in terms of structures, branches, and so on, those structures will have to make their own determination and their own direction. Not all structures of the EFF rather are inherently in support of Julius Malema. What has not been able to happen is actually for Malema to be challenged for the position of president. And if that challenge were to happen, and I think it may have occurred had Floyd still remained within the ranks of the EFF, it would give a sense of appetite for change within the rank and file of the EFF. And I do think that, when you talk about structures and, loyalty, where people are, it becomes important for any leader to do a test check as to whether or not they still have the support of the ground forces, as it is called within the EFF, lingo. And where we are today, it may well be that Malema secures his leadership by fending off any sense of being challenged. But for the broader, positions, he would need to have a serious sense check as to, where the structures are, what the branches are thinking, and who it is that they might actually support versus who he believes should occupy the second in command role. I think this is a serious test of trust, a serious test of loyalty, and of course a serious test of sustainability for the organization going forward, if indeed it is to remain a standalone organization that will be in future ballot papers of South African elections. But as things stand, it's an organization that is really threatened, and its potential growth is completely scuppered at the moment.
Lukhona, it's a pity your line is not clear on your end because, of course, there are so many moving parts. The possibilities, of course, of where Advocate Mpofu will be placed in the MK party, considering, of course, that they also have their leadership 8, and, of course, that resignation yesterday by the Secretary General of the MK Party too. So lots to unpack, but I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunities. But thank you so much for your time, Political Analyst Lukhona Mnguni there.